This is a tutorial on getting started with Payment Gateway Extensibility. So first, here's the documentation. Make sure to read this first, and we're going to be working through the steps in this document to create our own gateway and test it out in a Kibo sandbox. So first of all, a general architecture of this system. The PCI environment is separate than the rest of the Kibo environment. And what we're doing is creating a containerized gateway that is only contacted by the Kibo backend. So for example, the theme does not call the gateway directly. The theme or payment action in admin calls into the Kibo environment. In the backend, it makes this request to the gateway in a very well-defined interface, saying, I want to capture on this card for this amount, or I want to credit this card for this amount. And what the Payment Gateway Extensibility does is it makes that request to the Payment Gateway provider and then returns that back to Kibo. So what we're doing is implementing an interface for these types of payment requests to the gateway. Here's our template. This is the template. Everything must use this going forward. In the past, separate languages were supported and standardizing and just using this one template. So what we're going to do is clone this repository, and we'll open it up. And we're going to run this locally on our computer. So we're going to install the dependencies, and in the back end, we are going to open this in Visual Studio Code. And a quick tour of the Payment Gateway template. In our source, this is the main file that we're going to be implementing, the gateway adapter. So for here, this says when we're getting an authorized request from Kibo, here's the shape of this authorization request, and we have to return this authorization response. So what this does is it transforms this request into a request that the Payment Gateway provider is using, makes that API call to the Payment Gateway provider using REST, SOAP, whatever protocol that they're using, and then transforms that back into a Kibo Gateway Authorization Response. And then that's what Kibo receives. So we'll just see what happens when we have the not implemented, and we should see an error in admin when we try to run this and put an order through admin. So now that we have the dependencies installed, npm run dev, and that will start our gateway at port 3000. What we usually use for testing these is ngrok. So this starts a sort of proxy. Everything at this address will go to my computer and be accessible to make this available over the public internet. So what we're going to do is create a payment gateway in Kibo. So I just created a new application, Test Payment Gateway, and it doesn't need any behaviors. All you need is a new capability, and it's going to be Payment Gateway Adapter. So add this in as the address and make sure that it is HTTPS. HTTP will fail. And the documentation on this structure is in the documentation, mainly setting up what cards over here. The configuration, you usually want to leave this empty. You configure this on the, usually in your payment gateway instead of in here. And once this is certified, this whole configuration is locked down, and so you can't change it. Although you can deploy new versions, it can go through the certification process and get redeployed. But this configuration itself gets locked down after certification. And then in your administration UI, this is where you put any secrets. And this allows you to put credentials in admin, save them, they get saved securely, and then only the gateway itself can receive them in the PCI environment. So Usually these are credentials to the gateway. And then we'll just select all the countries here. So save that, and then install on your tenant. And note that every time you change this address in dev, you need to reinstall. So for example, if you're in Grok, time runs out, just change this address, reinstall, and that will be the address that it's talking to. So I have a new order. Note that payments sort of remember the gateway that they're using. And so you need to add a new payment when you're testing this. But first we need to add the gateway over here. So create a new payment gateway, test payment gateway, my test gateway. Save that. And then you need to go into payment types and then change this Visa my test gateway. So then you can go back to admin, find an order, and add the payment. And we will add a Visa. And we'll save that. It's okay, and it immediately tried to authorize on the card, and the auth failed. And if you look at your node, you can see that it posted to the authorize and then returned to 501. You can also see that on the in-Grok post authorize 501 method not implemented. So we can just uncomment this. And so basically anything that you'll return something that follows this payment authorization response. If you hold down Control and click into this, you can see the fields that are defined. And so because this is TypeScript, it will type check your response and your request. And so if we want to, for example, not use anything from the request, although you could look request dot and then pull through here like the card issue number if you wanted to get the card number. But instead we'll just return a no op captured for demonstration. Save this. When you go back to your node tab, it restarts. There's a node mon that's listening in the background. And then when we add a new credit card, then we have an authorized response, and this is our text that was returned. The reason I didn't use this, it actually tried to re-auth on there once I created the new payment. And so that's the main idea. You just implement these methods and get the response. One thing that you can do in Grok is this inspector has a list of all the data coming through it. Just go look on port 4040 on localhost. And so if you're trying to debug this locally, you can just copy this. Instead of having to click through cards in admin and manually do it, you can just use curl. And so you want to curl localhost at port 3000 and then on your authorized route. And then you need to include content type application JSON. And then in your data is what you put here. So this lets you test over and over, and you can check on your test payment gateway provider. But this gives you a really fast iteration cycle to to test. So if, for example, you just wanted to write captured instead, you could save this. The payment gateway is restarted, and then try your request again, and the response text will change. That's the gist of it. When you commit, it'll run some linting tests and run the test cases. So make sure you implement the test cases and that you pass all the linting rules. Once it's complete, you contact Kibo Professional Services and they can help you build a dev payment gateway that's hosted in the Kibo dev environment. And then do a pre-review, and then it'll go to the architecture team for the PCI review. And once that's certified, then that'll go to the Kibo production PCI and can be installed on a PCI production tenant. So that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed.